Yeah. My name is Jack Puryear, retired Lieutenant Commander of the U.S. Navy.
Alrighty. And I know Miss Sharp told me that you served during World War II.
Right.
And others. So can you tell me when you started your time in the military?
When I started?
Yes.
It was in, excuse me, spring, I think it's March of 1942.
Alrighty. And did you enlist?
Oh yeah. You know, that was just a few months after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
So myself and most of my classmates
Really?
said, you know, we're going to join the military because we've got to beat the Japs, you know. So myself and all my peers, some joined the Marines, some the Army, Air Force, and myself and 3 other guys, we joined, we went to the Navy.
And why did you choose the Navy?
Well, I wanted to, all three of us, wanted to be in Navy aviation.
Okay.
We wanted to go to Pensacola to do flight training, you know, to be a pilot, you know. But at first I passed all the eye exams and was okay to go, but then about the time I got orders to report to the Navy, I had an eye problem, so that flunked me out of the pilots, you know, training.
Oh.
But I had the option of staying in naval aviation, so I chose naval photography.
Okay.
Being an aerial photographer.
Mm-hmm.
And and that the naval photography training is also in Pensacola, Florida,
Okay.
where all the pilots are trained. So I was called to duty and spent 6 months in Pensacola learning basic photography, and then aerial photography,
Mm-hmm.
doing flying. And then after that, I was sent to Washington, D.C. to get some courses in photo interpretation, then sent directly to San Diego and was assigned to a air crew. It was a crew, B-24s, the Liberator, 4-engine plane.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Admiral Nimitz formed first as an experimental squadron for making mosaic maps. I'll explain that later.
Okay.
What they are. And so my squadron was already over on Guadalcanal. Right after they secured Guadalcanal, that's the early part of the war.
Mm-hmm.
The Marines landed on Guadalcanal and captured the island and the air base there. And so our squadron was, when I was sent to San Diego, my squadron was already out on Guadalcanal. And it just 8 planes. And like I say, it was an experimental squadron.
Mm-hmm.
So they had 8 planes, and right away, unfortunately, 5 of them were shot down.
Right away.
So I was one of the replacement crews.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I got there, they had been out there about almost a year.
Wow.
And so the squadron leaders and Admiral Nimitz's group, they said, well, we can't continue to go in to make mosaic maps like we're doing now. We have to change our tactics
Mm-hmm.
on how we do this, because we're losing too many planes. And those planes are expensive because they're loaded with cameras in the bomb bay. So by the time I got there, And one reason why I had so many shot down, we didn't have enough fighter planes in the first part of the war.
Okay.
Well, you know, 1939 and 40, President Roosevelt was sending most of our fighter planes to England because England and France need them to fight the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
So most of our fighters were over there and given to them, and down in the South Pacific, we didn't have enough fighters.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some, but so it's decided that before we go in to make a Bozak map, and what you do 2 to 3 weeks before they invade an island. Let's take Palau Island. It's not far from Guadalcanal.
Mm-hmm.
The first time we flew over there, they had Japs had a lot of fighters there.
Mm-hmm.
They shot down one of our planes.
Okay.
So we said, okay, they're going to invade Palau now in a month. So what we're going to do, we're not going to go and make our Mosaic map until the Navy starts bombarding, what did I say?
Palau Island?
Hmm?
The Palau Island, is that what you called it?
Palau.
Yeah, Palau.
Palau. So we said, we're not going to fly over Palau until the Navy starts bombarding,
Mm-hmm.
you know, from the ships. And they usually do that about 2 to 3 weeks before they invade.
Okay.
So while they were bombarding and the Navy carriers were strafing, then we came in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Japs Zeros were after our planes off of the carrier
Mm-hmm.
and trying to get to the fleet, and they didn't pay much attention to us
Yeah.
up to 20,000 feet
Mm-hmm.
where we make our maps. So that's what we did from then on. Bougainville, we invaded Bougainville. The B-25s and the B-17s were bombing that island, and so then we came in at 20,000 feet. We did get a few zeros that time, and we got shot up a little, but we did complete our mission
Mm-hmm.
and got back to Guadalcanal and made our maps. And so that was the process we went through all through the South Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And then after about a year, we secured the South Pacific. Right off of Guadalcanal, there were 3 major sea battles. Bull Halsey's fleet. And the first fight with the Japanese, they controlled almost all of the South Pacific, the Japanese did. And so the first sea battle they had with the Japanese defeated Bull Halsey's fleet. Sank, gosh, what, 2 carriers and a battleship, and I forgot how many destroyers and things. Anyhow, they call that what they call the strait in there, but the strip where these 3 battles were fought. They called it Iron Bottom Bay because it's just
Mm-hmm.
covered with sunken ships.
Oh, wow.
But also the Japanese lost about a third of their fleet. So 6 months later, Bull Halsey came, but Bull Halsey wasn't killed. He got off okay. Anyhow, he came back with his second fleet, and it was a tie. The Japanese came down from Morro Bay, and they met right in the middle of the strait there,
Mm-hmm.
off of Guadalcanal. And it was a 50-50 battle. They lost 14 ships, we lost 14 ships.
Okay.
So about 7 months after that, Bull Halsey came back again with a bigger fleet, and he destroyed the Japanese.
There we go.
Sank 3 of their battleships, and to the Japanese, the battleship was the ship, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So he sank 3 of them. So then we gradually took control of the South Pacific, defeated all the Japs. Admiral Mamoto was shot down trying to go back to Japan, we had some P-38s on Guadalcanal, and the Indians, American Indians, broke the Japanese code.
Yeah, the Navajo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I've read about that. Yeah.
And so they knew exactly when Admiral Yamamoto was going to leave the South Pacific heading back to Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had 5 P-38s on Guadalcanal, and there were 2 off of Bougainville. They all took off, knowing exactly where Yamamoto was going to be after he left. And they intercepted him, and he had 8 Zeros with him to protect him, and these P-38 shot down all the Zeros, and then they shot down Yamamoto's twin-engine plane, and his executive officer was in the plane back of him and shot him down too. But he landed in the ocean and he survived.
Oh, okay.
Yamamoto was shot down and landed in the forest, and was killed. So after we secured the South Pacific, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and everybody together, and by then we'd made probably 12 or 15 invasion maps to show the Marines and the Army needed those to know where to land, where the best beach is to land, and our color film showed the depth of the water, so they'd know exactly how deep the water was, and then it also showed where the Japanese had their gun emplacements, their shore patrols, their anti-aircraft guns, their shore batteries, and so the guys the aircraft would know exactly where to go in and destroy those guns before they landed. So the invasion maps were very important. So after we got through with the South Pacific, we came back. We only had, out of the 8 planes we had then, only 2 of them were able to fly back to the States, because we did get shot up. All the planes got shot up some. And so the skipper and the executive officer flew the 2 good planes back to the States. The rest of us had to come back on a ship. And we got to San Francisco, and we had a week's leave, and then we got 8 new aircraft and some personnel, because we lost a few personnel. And then we headed back overseas again. And just before we left to come home, we did the mapping of Guam, Saipan, and Tinian.
Oh, wow.
3 major islands that the Japs held. And so we did the invasion maps for that. So while we were back in the States, they invaded Guam, Saipan, Tinian, and secured them. So when we came back out, Guam was secure, so we were based on Guam. And excuse me. Of the 8 planes, we kept 4 planes on Guam. We had 2 on Okinawa and 2 on Iwo Jima.
Okay.
Then we would rotate. And the 4 that were on Guam had the duty of to fly over the bypassed islands. Truk, I don't know if you ever heard of Truk or not, but Truk was a big naval base in the Pacific, which the Japanese had for years, and it was heavily fortified, and it was very difficult to invade because it had a ring of small islands around it. I forgot what you call that now. I used to say, but it would be hard to land on Truk. So we sent a plane over Truk 3 times a week just to keep track of what they were doing.
Mhm.
And occasionally we would find ships going in, supply ships and such. And then if we found certain ships, our photos showed ships in there or out someplace in the bay. The B-25s would come in from Guam and sink those ships,
Mhm.
you know. So it was very important to keep track of these bypassed islands.
Mhm.
All over the Carolinas, the Solomons and Admiralty Islands, we bypassed a bunch of Japanese islands,
Mhm.
cut them off. And consequently, a lot of Japanese starved to death, you know, out there because they didn't get supplies.
Mhm.
But anyhow, we kept 2 on Okinawa, 2 on Iwo, and the 4 back here. And I have some material here that explains what we were doing on Okinawa. We landed there right after the invasion, and they secured the airstrip. We landed, jumped out of the plane, and the Marines were there with a truck, and they said, "Jump in, guys, we'll take you to the tent area." So we went over to the tent area. They threw 3 tents out. You know, there's 10 men in a B-24 in our plane. So they threw 3 tents out, and they threw out 4 shovels. We said, "What's the shovel for?" They said, "You better start digging your foxhole right now."
Oh.
And that was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon when we got there. And we said, "Oh, we'll do it in the morning." The guy said, "No, you better start now." And sure enough, within about 30 minutes, the 40mm anti-aircraft guns started going off.
Oh, wow.
And kamikaze planes started coming in.
Oh, my goodness.
And one of them was shot down right over us. And he came down, straight down, and he hit as far as us to those trees out there, probably 80 feet
Oh,
or
my
more.
gosh.
And they had aboard a 500-pound bomb, because when it went into our ships, they crashed our ships. They wanted that bomb to blow up, see? So the plane was shot down, and we saw him coming down, and we just started on our foxhole, and so we just hit the deck, you know, laid flat. And I can't tell you the pilot of that plane, where he landed, what parts of him landed on me.
Oh, my goodness.
But, well, I'll tell you, it was his foot and his ankle.
Oh, my goodness.
And, of course, the concussion got me. That's the reason why I can't hear good, you know. So, we stayed up most of the night digging that foxhole. Finally got it done, and so the next day we took off and flew over Japan. And there was 2 invasions planned of Japan. The first was Operation Olympic, and that was going to be the invasion of the southern island of Japan, called Kyushu. And in fact, if I had it handy here. Yeah. This is a newspaper article.
Okay.
It shows you Okinawa is down here.
Okay.
And this is going to be Operation Olympic. That's going to be the invasion of Kyushu, the southern island of Japan.
Okay.
See it right there?
Yes.
The southern island. And then the invasion of the Tokyo area up here, this was going to be in October. And then the following February was going to be the invasion of the Tokyo area.
Oh, so of the main part of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to get here, we were down here on Iwo Jima, flying up here. But this time we were flying over from Okinawa here. And the first day we went up there were so many Japanese Zeros after us that we had to turn around and run.
Oh.
And then it's only about a 2-hour flight from Okinawa to Kyushu. So we radioed back to the fighter screen around Okinawa. All day and all night they kept a fighter screen around Okinawa. So we told them we're under attack. So those guys came out to meet us and stopped the Japs from following us and shooting at us. We made it back. And they shot down a couple of the Zeros. So the next day, the P-51 aircraft, it was the best fighter we had in World War II, had just been developed, and 2 squadrons of them came out to Okinawa. The first day we were flying over Japan, those P-51s arrived. So the next day when we took off, 85 P-51s were surrounded us and took us in.
Wow.
So when the Japs came up, they were surprised.
You had quite the escort going in.
They didn't know we had that escort, you know. And they came in, and that's the first time I really saw a huge fight. Fighter planes fighting each other. You know, they engaged. You know, when we are under attack, I leave my positions in the bomb bay with the cameras. But when you're under the attack, you have to do evasive action, and you have to stop your cameras. You know, stop your photography. And so then I'd go back to the waist hatch and fire a 50mm machine gun. You know, and I was looking out there, firing at a few Zeros, and those P-51s were coming down, shooting down Zeros, bursting into flames.
Oh wow!
It was like a 4th of July.
Oh my goodness!
It was really a fight.
Wow.
So, but anyhow, we didn't get much done. In fact, there was so much anti-aircraft fire down here that we had a hard time completing our mission here. But flying off of Iwo up to Tokyo, we flew behind the B-29s. In fact, like, this was why we, you know, the invasion of Iwo was very costly. Lost a lot of lives. In fact, one of my best friends was buried right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When I got there, I found his grave and brought home some pictures for his parents. But that's why we needed Iwo Jima. The B-29s that were shot up or short of fuel, you know, landed on Iwo Jima, or they crash land, like this one crash land, you know. So we had to have Iwo Jima. But what would happen, these B-29s were based on Guam. The guy lives right down the hall. He was in the squadron that was on Guam, and they would take off from Guam. They were faster than we were, of course, and they had a longer range. We couldn't fly from Guam to Tokyo and back. We didn't have enough fuel. So we would be on Iwo, and when these guys would take off, they'd be flying a couple hours, then we'd take off like this, and they'd come over us, you see, and we'd follow them in and get up above them, and they'd do their bombing runs, and we'd come in behind them. So the Tokyo anti-aircraft fire and Zeros were after them. They knew who we were. They knew we weren't dropping bombs, you know. So they went after them and didn't come after us. we had a couple after us, but didn't do any much damage. But so they'd go in and do their bombing. We'd go in and do our photo work for the planned invasion of Cornet, which was going to be in February.
Okay.
So we got all of that done because we came in after these guys.
Yeah.
And let me show you what I'm talking about as far as that was Okinawa.
Okay.
That's our tents. That's us digging our foxhole. See, I was in the foxhole and took a picture, but it's very primitive, you know. But this shows you how the cameras are installed in the bomb bay.
Okay.
4 cameras. This is a telephoto lens, a medium lens, and a wide-angle lens. And so the photo interpreters, that book over there shows the photo interpreters that took our film and prints and made the mosaic maps. But let's see. That's not what I wanted. I just had all this stuff out here because there was a professor I met. I was in Alabama 2 weeks ago, and I met this professor from Tennessee, University of Tennessee, who was studying World War II, and he started questioning me about, he'd never heard of a photo squadron.
Oh.
So he wanted all the information he could get, you know, so I just got through sending him a bunch of stuff. But see, that's me.
Oh, wow.
That was over North Japan because it's very cold up there. When we were in the...
What, 20,000 feet, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it'd be 50 and 60 degrees below zero, you know.
Gosh.
So that was an electric suit, heated, you know.
Okay.
But down the South Pacific, we didn't need those. Didn't get cold, you know, up there that high. But this is a mosaic map. See all these overlapping photographs?
Yeah.
See, and that's a complete picture of that island. See? So, let's see here. See, that's the B-24. And this is showing, of course, at 20,000 feet, you have to have oxygen, you know. And that's me with a telephoto lens, you know, camera. Let's see. Squadron flying together. Well, we'd carry 4 bombs with us in the front bomb bay. So if we spotted a Japanese sampan or some kind of boat or ship tied up, we'd go in and try to bomb it and try to hit it. In the first part of the war, these are the guys that used to go in with us, but we had so few of them. Like I say, most of them were in Europe. But this guy, you can see how many Japanese planes he shot down.
Oh, is that what that means? Oh, wow.
See that? He was an ace at Bull Halsey at our place, and like we were, and this the night before, the skipper would tell us where we were going to fly and what islands we were going to fly over, and we'd be there taking our notes, you know. And we usually took off at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, very early. And that's the whole squadron.
Wow.
When we did Guam, Saipan, Tinian. That was a big deal. And the B-25s, we would, when we spotted something out at sea, we'd call them, they'd come out and seek whatever ships we spotted. And here's the guy, you know, putting the photos together. See? And on Guam, this is our photo lab. It's very hot down there, you know. So these little guys were air conditioned. That's where we developed the film. I mean, the ground crew developed the film and everything. This old boy was the chief of the natives on Guadalcanal.
Oh, okay.
And these guys, his guys would come down the river. The river went right by our camp. And I took this picture of these two guys. They held up the finger and said, 2 pics, please. Back tomorrow. Boy, they came back to get their picture.
Oh my goodness.
And the old chief loved to have his picture taken.
Oh, really?
So we were good to him. And he wouldn't let anybody in the village, you know, where the women and children were. But one day he invited 3 of us. He said, "You good guys, you come with me." He took us to his village.
Oh, wow.
And see, they're just raw natives, you see. See, they really had on just practically no clothes. Then Bob Hope came to entertain us one night. And that's me firing the gun. Some of our squadron. Our tents were over here. The flight line was down there. There was our little mascot. And this is when we landed. This is Iwo Jima, you know, where so many of our guys were killed right there on that beach. That's the way we used to bathe.
Oh.
This plane is the turret of one of these planes that cracked up.
Oh.
We'd take the turret parts off and make it into a bathtub. Well, that's just a bunch of. Well, these are some of the natives on Okinawa. Then, when the Japanese surrendered, my crew, we were on Iwo Jima. And
sorry, 1 second. My camera's being difficult.
Running out.
Oh, yes, just to change the battery pack. Go right ahead. I'm just gonna. You can keep going right ahead.
Okay.
The phone pick you up.
When the war ended, we were on Iwo Jima, and Admiral Nimitz said, "As soon as they surrender, you guys fly to Tokyo and start making maps of the major harbors where our fleet will be pulling in, like the USS Missouri. They signed the peace treaty on the Missouri, you know. To get into Tokyo Bay, they wanted to be sure where the sunken ships were, where how to maneuver to get into the bay. So my plane was to photograph Tokyo Bay and Nagi Bay, which is another bay on the other side of the island. And so they surrendered one night, and we were up that night waiting for them. We knew they were going to surrender. We didn't know for sure when. So finally, about 1:30 in the morning, my friend down the hall in the B-29s was on his way back. He had just dropped the last bomb on Tokyo.
Oh, goodness.
And he was on his way back. And he was just past Iwo when we heard the announcement that the Japanese had surrendered. And so he heard it while he was in the air, you know. So when he landed in Guam, you know, they were celebrating. But on Iwo that night, when they surrendered, you know, you saw the pictures of New York City of everybody hollering and celebrating and everything, you know. Out there, on these islands, all of us, we said, "Oh, thank God, it's over. We can go home." You know, it's there was no big celebration, no shooting of guns or anything. You know, and but then people were surprised. They asked, so many people asked, "Well, didn't y'all celebrate?" I said, "Yeah, we said a prayer and went to bed, thanking God for letting us live through this." So, so so we were assigned to go in and photograph the bays. So we got up there that first day, and it was bad weather. We couldn't photograph. But MacArthur was sending in the occupation troops, and they were landing on this Japanese naval base. These are some of their shot-up planes, and this is some of their old barracks. And this is some of the first occupation forces landed on Japan. And so we got up there, the weather was bad, so we just dropped in line where the MacArthur's troops were landed, and we got in line with them, and we landed with them on the base. And we stayed in this old barracks here. But our plane was so heavy, a B-24. Are you real familiar with B-24?
I believe so.
There's a model one down there on the bottom, you know. They're heavy planes. So the Japanese planes were very light. They didn't have a lot of armament on them or anything. So when we landed and we got to the end of the runway, we sunk.
Oh.
Their asphalt was so thin, we just sank down in their asphalt. So anyhow, we finally got a tractor on the Japanese base there, and we pulled the plane out over on some high land, and the next day the weather cleared and we took off. We started taxiing. When you're in danger of sinking, you keep the plane moving. So we just kept moving, got to the end of the runway, just kept going and gave it full throttle and took off, you know, to keep from sinking again. And so we got our photo work done. There I am in a Japanese Zero. And and then we did our photo work over the bays, flew back to Iwo Jima, and there was we called them Greyhounds. It's a plane that waiting for us to land. They take our film and fly it back to Guam to these guys, and they develop the film and make the prints and everything, and then send them out to the fleet. Like the Missouri was out there, and Admiral Nimitz was on it, and all the other dignitaries, and our Greyhound plane would fly over the fleet and then drop the photographs on the other ship, on the fleet out there, so they'd know exactly where to pull in and everything. And then our work was complete then. But this was a little town right near that Japanese base. And these are some of the first Japanese people we saw, you know, on Japan, you know, itself, in the Tokyo area. And then we went back to Guam, and my squadron and my plane and one other plane had been out. You know, we had been out on Guadalcanal early, and we were old timers in the squadron. So we had enough points to come home. We stayed about 3 weeks, winded up, and the two of us flew back to the States. And we were free to go home, and you know, we discharged. And so when I was discharged, I said, I want to stay in reserve. So I stayed in reserve, And when the Korean War started, they I was recalled to duty in 1951, and went aboard an aircraft carrier, and I was the paymaster aboard the carrier, and I had about $1,200,000 in that safe.
Wow.
And so these are just pictures of the carrier, you know. And then in Japan, I met a Dr. Matsuo. He studied in the States. He was a Christian minister. I went to visit him several times. The chaplain on the base there, where our carrier was docked, had heard about him, so we went up there and met him, and he invited us to his home 3 different times for lunch.
Wow.
He was a great guy. And then one of his neighbors was a Shinto. He was going to get married, and he saw I had a camera. He said, Mr. Puryear, would you mind taking some pictures of my wedding? I said, sure.
Oh, wow.
So these are pictures of his wedding.
Oh, wow.
And just myself and our dentist board just around Japan. So that's about it.
Well, something I kind of have a question about is I know you were in the Pacific at the time that the Japanese surrendered. Were you told, or did you know anything at the time, like about like them dropping like nuclear bombs on parts of Japan?
Oh yeah.
What did, this might seem like a silly question, like what was that? What was that like? Like it was, you know, it's one of the most destructive weapons in history, and
Yeah.
we're dropping it on people, and
Yeah. But if they hadn't dropped them, I wouldn't be here.
oh yeah.
You know, we'd have lost a million personnel. And the Japanese would have lost at least 2 million if we had to invade, you know. So it was necessary to drop those bombs, you know. And you probably never heard of this, but I have a CD that tells the story of President Truman told the emperor after they dropped the second bomb, he says, okay, now you have 4 days to surrender. If you don't surrender in 4 days, we're going to drop the 3rd bomb. He said he told him where he was going to drop it. He said, no, after 4 days, I'm dropping this bomb if you don't surrender. Well, the emperor told his people, he said, you've suffered enough, we're going to surrender. But there was a major in the Japanese army that went around and visited 3 of the other warlords and said, let's don't surrender. Let's keep fighting. So all 4 of them said, okay, we're going to keep fighting. So that major went into the emperor's grounds, which is forbidden, and took the emperor prisoner. And that was really unheard of.
Yeah.
So, but to do this, they needed the 5th general. The 5th general was in charge of the Japanese First Army. It was the biggest. And they were in the Tokyo Bay area. They were the ones we were photographing every day because they were expecting us to land in the Tokyo Bay area. So they kept changing their gun batteries and, you know, and moving personnel around. So every day we'd fly over and photograph what they were doing. So he went to the general of the First Army. He said he had the 3 meanest warlords on his side, so 4 of them, but they needed him, the 5th, the head of the First Army, to join them, to keep fighting, not surrender. And the general said, Major, he said, what you have done, you have taken the emperor prisoner, you've gone into the sacred grounds. He said, you have disobeyed all the, I forgot what they called it, of all the laws of the Japanese people, you know. He said, you're going to stand down or I'm going to kill you right now. So but he said, I want you to go back and tell the other three generals they better stand down or I'm coming after them.
Mm-hmm.
So this Japanese officer said, okay, so he went back to the other three Japanese generals, and all three of them committed hara-kiri.
Oh my goodness.
And then that major shot himself in the head. So all four of them killed themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, see, they were searching, like I say, Hirohito, the emperor, had already made recordings surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
But then the people who had the recordings, he made them one evening. He said, tomorrow morning you announce, put this record on to all by radio to all over Japan that we have surrendered.
Mm-hmm.
So this major heard about that. So he went in trying to find that recording.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to destroy it because he had the emperor, you know, prisoner. So, but the people who made the recording had hid it.
Mm-hmm.
They had a bunch of newspapers in a closet, and they stuck it into the bottom. But the major's people went in and ransacked the radio station, and they couldn't find the recordings.
That's good.
So that's when he went on and talked to the first general, and then he killed himself.
Mm-hmm.
So when those guys killed themselves, the radio station was free to put the recordings on, and it was just the fourth day, you know, just in time before we dropped the next bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And so we heard the surrender, but it was 1:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's really into the past the fourth day, but it was just in time to keep us from dropping the next bomb.
Mm-hmm.
But that story, very few people, has very little publicity about that coup attempt.
Mm-hmm.
And this professor at the University of Tennessee, I sent him a copy of that recording, and he said, I'd never heard of that, you know. And he had not really heard about our kind of squadron, you know. Like,
I mean, I'd heard about like aerial photography surveillance during the Cold War, but not during World War II.
Yeah. See, now it's all done by satellite.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the stuff they've seen with that too. And so then you said you were in the reserve after the war, and then you were called to the Korean War in '51.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what was the ship you were on, the carrier? What was its role at that time?
We were operating off of North Korea.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I say, I was the paymaster aboard it. And then I spent 6 months on a destroyer because each aircraft carrier has 4 destroyers with it, and a cruiser behind it. That's what you call a squadron.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 2 carriers, so you have 2 squadrons together.
Mm-hmm.
Our squadron, our carriers here, and another carrier behind us. We had 4 destroyers and a cruiser. This carrier had 4 destroyers and a cruiser.
Mm-hmm.
So something happened to the supply officer aboard one of the destroyers, so I went and served as supply officer aboard that destroyer for 6 months before we came back to the States.
Mm-hmm.
But and we saw action off of North Korea. Our planes from the carriers were flying every day, you know, and then every day one of our destroyers would break out from the squadron and go in and bombard. There's a rail line all along the east coast and north coast of Korea. And I mean, we'd go in there one day and bombard the train tunnels. Boy, right after that, that coolies would be out there opening up that tunnel again. And they had to go in the next day. And so
repeat, rebuild, repeat, rebuild.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
So we not only escorted the carriers, we went in and did some bombardment. And my position as a supply officer, doing general quarters, when you're in firing your 5-inch guns at the shore, my general quarters position was a safety officer, gunnery safety officer, and it was down below deck, below the 5-inch guns. And let's see, I got a picture of this somewhere. And well, no, I don't know. It's here somewhere, but no telling where. Oh, that's the destroyer, 745.
Okay.
You can see the aircraft carrier here is being refueled with the tanker there, and the destroyer is right there being refueled. So you're in that squadron together. But my position was down under the turrets, watching the sailors passing the shells and the powder. The powder is in bags about this big, about this long, you know, about that big around. What kind of powder? Gunpowder. And then a shell goes on top of that, an explosive shell. So they pass the powder up, and then they'd grab the shells and pass them up. So it was just a position, you know, in case anything. Like one time, one of the boys dropped one of the shells, and I had to grab it, you know, and and then they would fire those 5-inch guns, and the concussion down below was terrible. Another reason why I'm hard of hearing. So, but we had earplugs, you know, but they weren't real effective, you know. So,
can you tell me, like, maybe what your strongest memory from your time in the military is? Just something, I don't know, just something that stands out to you the most.
What now?
Just from like all your time in the military, like, what would you say is like a time or a moment that stands out to you the most?
Well, that what scanned me out the most?
That stands out to you the most, that you remember very clearly.
Oh,
yeah.
I remember all of it very clearly.
Okay.
I really do.
Okay.
Yeah. There's very little I don't remember, really.
Okay.
And I don't regret any time serving in the military, you know. And it was necessary. 4 years of World War II, 2 in Korea, and I stayed in reserve for 22 years, you know. So I don't regret any of it. And like my 2 boys that are in well, I had one grandson in the Marine Corps, but in Afghanistan he was wounded very badly, and he's back home now. But the other 2 went to West Point, or like I say, captains, and they've both been to Afghanistan. And the oldest ones, my wife is at a bridal shower for my oldest grandsons. They're getting married next month, so they're having a shower today. And then the younger one, 2 years younger, he's engaged to one with a young lady that was a cadet at West Point
Oh, wow.
in the class together.
Oh, my goodness.
And they're both now in captain school, and they're engaged, and they're going to get married at West Point probably in January or February.
So it sounds like the military's pretty strong in the family.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's amazing. The people, well, I've done this a couple times, a couple of these interviews, and sometimes I'm asked like, oh, do you have family in the military? Like, is that how you got into this? Not at all.
Really?
I had no exposure to the military, but it was something that I didn't know a lot about. I want to know more about. And it seems like not a lot of people understand how important it is to know about it, and how and that's what fascinates me, is like the mechanics of the war, and and how it happened and everything like that. What was I gonna ask? You said when you were during World War II, when you were flying those aerial surveillance missions, you said sometimes you got shot at, like over the places you were taking pictures of. Was there any time you thought it was really bad, or were shells just bouncing off you, or was there any time like that?
Yeah. Oh, Puryear Island was our worst.
Okay.
One of our worst ones. Because we didn't have any fighter escort, we didn't have any bombardment or anything. And the Japs had some excellent fighter planes there. And we didn't get much of our mission done. And they really shot us up pretty bad. And that day, our navigational equipment was destroyed, and we almost didn't make it back to our base in New Guinea.
Oh gosh.
But have you ever heard of Australian shoremen? Australia had volunteers that went out on the islands. You know, the Japs tried to invade Australia, but Australia, stopped them, and the British and the Australians. And so the Australian people did everything they could to help the Allies defeat the Japanese. And they had volunteer radiomen that went out on all these different islands in the Solomons and New Guinea and at the Admiralty Islands. And I forgot the actual name of them, but they were shore watch when our pilots got shot down or got lost, like our navigational equipment was shot out, and our 4 planes were dispersed. Because they were after us so bad.